Welcome. This is part 2 of the Deep Fractal Plasma Science of the 2012 story from Dan Winter, goldenmean.info/Carrington event. In this part, we discuss the plasma science of the Nine, starting with the Whale Dreamers story. As you know, the Whale Dreamers film, funded by John Lennon's son, goldenmean.info/Whale Dreamers is the excerpt. We see that in the film, they're talking about this wave envelope, this plasma storm that hits, in this case, off of South Australia, and at the Bight, south of Adelaide, and where the whale dream is projected into the stars. And we're looking at the science from Los Alamos, the article from John McGovern, and the plasma science group at Los Alamos Institute. They mapped this plasma storm that hit the South Australian every 6,000 or so years. It's comparable to Shiva or Vishnu in an envelope, as we see here. The important dynamic to discover there was that that plasma storm actually was composed of 7 of these nested donuts. I'm sorry, 9. There were 9 donuts in that array, and it was discovered that, in fact, plasma storms in general self-organize into that array of the 9, as it were, accounting for why the Hopi called it, remember, the way of the 9, Peshmate and Deep Space Nine and all that, and why you have 9 chakras, 2 above your 7, because it takes 9 donuts in a plasma storm in a line to create that self-organizing life field, which is why there are 9 steps of Palenque, the pagoda, and also the Ennead and the Anunnaki Egyptian 9 concept. So when the plasma scientists discovered the geometry of that, if you see here, that the cross-section of that donut, one of the donuts in that plasma storm, had actually been carved by the shaman all around the earth because he had seen it and felt it in their body, as if to say, shamanically navigated that plasma storm. And that they saw the actual latitude where the shaman had carved the picture of the plasma storm, indicated their attitude with reference to it, indicating that, in fact, they knew that as they navigated their plasma body shamanically, Shem-An, as it were, they were actually seeing this giant body of God, as it were, and that's what the Plasma Universe websites are about, that the plasma shapes of the stars are, in fact, the shape of what was called God. And so we see that the 9 interdigitated golden ratio tetrahedron, which correspond to what's been called the Sri Yantra, in fact correspond to 9 interdigitated opposing vortex cones, literally phase conjugating. We have many images of that. And then there's that lovely film about that from, it's called The Last Mimsy. Let me get to the right slide here. And in The Last Mimsy, the kids are seen navigating into the stars in the shape of that Sri Yantra. If I can get this gadget to get a right animation here, 1 second. So the concept was that the double opposing vortex cones, which are how you insert your plasma into stars. There it is, again, from Last Mimsy. Sorry, we had a little burp here. So this is the film Last Mimsy, and it's about the Sri Yantra and how children use that to actually affect the power grid, and they do it from this perspective of the 9. So the last part of this presentation will be about understanding the physics of alphabets and how the plasma storm making a center helps us understand the science of alphabets. And sorry, our visuals aren't keeping up with us very well here. But remember, we had in the Hebrew alphabet, we had the spiral on a donut, angle into compression, indexed by the spin of the tetrahedron. So if you form a Hebrew letter in your brain and focus on it, it causes the plasma donut, which is your optical cortex, to be tilted to that phase angle, and then you blow that donut and you send that smoke ring at that phase angle, that vortex. And if you nest them properly, you get a golem. So and that's sort of the Hebrew alphabet story here. You remember that story. Here's some of the animations about that. Remember, there's the hey as in Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. But then we're going to just look briefly at the superset alphabet, the Ophanim Enochian, because it's so explicitly hypercubed dodeca, teaching us to do that phase shift, that implosion. So John Dee and Kelly saw these Ophanim letters in the plasma shape inside the green stone, and we recommend goldenmean.info/Ophanim, O-P-H-A-N-I-M, for this story. The point I want to make, though, is that after Vincent Bridges noted that those letters were arrayed in a hypercube, and that hypercube was this shape, you see the 6 around 1, 7 cubes would then compress on the outside in the tetracubic. What on the inside would be 5 cubes, which is the dodecahedron, which in our view is the only hypercube. And that creates this completed compression algorithm that you could blow the donuts, the vortex phase angles, to assemble them into the dodeca, the hypercube. And that would make implosion phase conjugation, and therefore the plasma storm of self-organization, the body of angels. And the skill to invoke the Ophanim angelic letters became the power of high magic, Golden Dawn, etc. Here we see the relationship of the origin of Greek to Ophanim Enochian. We see the shape, the letters in that tablet of Naljaj form the angel names Zavkiel, Zadkiel, Punael, Raphael, Haniel, Mikael, Gabriel. That angel names are just those phase angles, that the body of angels is those angles. And that is related to the origin of Cherokee. We suspect the Cherokee Adawi star elders was in fact Ophanim, which is similar to the word Patal in Egyptian. So Darlene, in Vincent Bridges and Darlene's book on the Ophanim, goldenmean.info/Ophanim, analyzes these vortex cones in the origin of Ophanim Enochian. And this is the key slide right here. Let's see if we can see it clearly. But if you pass a plane through double cones, which is phase conjugation, you see that where the plane crosses the double cones gives you the index to the shapes of the letters. Now what that means is that when you form the letter in your mind and then you blow the plasma field at the angle towards center of double cone, it causes them to phase conjugate, and that's Mag, as in magic, matrix of Agni, fire, implosion. So what the double cones of the geometry of Ophanim Enochian was teaching you was the physics of plasma compression implosive brought to the center of the particular angle that is phase conjugation. So if you analyze the number and geometry of those cones in Ophanim Enochian, you're basically seeing how angels assemble their body, precisely what the current plasma physics agrees is the physics of what used to be called God, the shape of angelic bodies, as it were. So that became, as you know, the tablets of Hermes, which is Patal, Thoth, and that became the Bonpo alphabet. And the Bonpo, you know, the Cherokee and the Bonpo, if you can make a flame with your mind, you are an initiate. This is the geometry of their alphabet. It is swastika, same as Holy Grail animation, and that is indeed how you make flame. Implosion of plasma with your mind. And that alphabet, Ophanim Enochian, became literally the movie Stargate, as you know, and that's the story of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. But to close then with the sort of deep science behind this, if you assemble plasma fields which are phase conjugate or fractal, you make this fractal in time, which is the only way it emerges from chaos. And so this is from our article, goldenmean.info/coincidence, where we first prove that hydrogen is a fractal in time. Here you have Planck time times golden ratio precisely equals the palladium sputtering frequencies and the key frequencies of hydrogen from Canzias. And then you see that the same equation, proof of fractality in time, Planck time times golden ratio, gives you the solar year of the Earth, and it gives you the Venus year. And this is the pent geometry of sacred Venus. You see the animation of phase conjugation there. And this is the geometry of Venus for a reason. This is where Osiris is returning, if you read Testimony of the Virgin by Anton Parks, that the orbit, this is the picture of the reverse retrograde orbit of Venus. It's pent, phase conjugate, implosive, and fractal, and will survive solar compression by being fractal. So our equations earlier had shown that Planck length times golden ratio equals the radii of hydrogen, and Planck time times golden ratio equals the frequency of hydrogen. That fractality is how hydrogen is held together. So all this goes together to just say, here's the picture of the universe as dodecahedral and fractal, to just say that if, in fact, we assemble our